Wow. Um, let that pass. So obviously it affected me majorly. Um, it's not just that I lived abroad, but much of my family lives in many countries. My dad in Canada, my sister in the US, my grandmother, cousins in France, Norway, England. Um, it shaped me. It taught me since a young age about anti-Semitism when Israeli children are sheltered from it. I was 7 years old, I think, when the first time I went to a McDonald's to eat in Paris a meal, and I was playing. They had these playgrounds, and a little boy came to me and heard my accent in French and was asking me where I'm from, telling him very proudly I'm from Israel. He looked at me, called me a dirty pig, and went to his mother that wore a hijab. That doesn't happen to kids here in Israel. We're quite sheltered from that hatred and racism, and throughout the years I've seen also the development of it. But living in Australia for 5 years, in the United States, having a family, have taught me a lot about the vulnerability, the challenges, and the strength of the diaspora. It's been extremely tough for them. In the last 2 years, many of these communities feel betrayed, whether it's from Ottawa or from Canberra in Australia, where their governments did not address the issue of anti-Semitism, did not draw a red line, and was not proactive in fighting it, and it deteriorated. And for me, it was personal. And with not just the rhetoric, it was also the declaration of the two-state solution just in the recent couple of months, and the intentions, and how these governments threw out to the bin years of diplomacy, of working together, of collaboration, to reward Hamas for the 7th of October massacre. And that's a huge betrayal in the state of Israel and the Jewish community.
Obviously, we mentioned Australia. Next month in October, you're scheduled to visit the Pacific region. Many pro-Israel countries there, of course. How significant for you is this initiative, and in what ways can you help strengthen Israel's standing in that international area?
Well, it's extremely important. Look, if anything we learn about diplomacy in the last 2 years is that we cannot take anything for granted. Friends that had stood with us for years. And during the last 2 years, we see how our enemies are trying to influence through economical collaboration, educational collaboration, political collaboration, in turning some of these friends against us. Now, some of these Pacific islands have stood with us throughout major pressure during those 2 years, also before, but especially during those 2 years. And I am so proud to be on the first ever government delegation to those countries to tell them how much we appreciate that. I mean, you know, not public diplomacy, but just diplomacy is about relationship. And one thing I learned in the foreign ministry is that the stronger you are capable of building those relationships with ministers, parliament members, the more they'll be able to stand beside you. And they need to be thanked for it. And I'm going with a big delegation, business delegation, cyber delegation, agriculture, water technology, to try and build and strengthen those bridges so that, you know, they've pushed off a lot of pressure. And many of these countries could have been economically rewarded by our enemy. Yet because of their moral clarity, because of their faith, understanding this conflict, it's not a territorial conflict. This is a religious, a cultural conflict that the world is facing while Israel is at the front line. And no country will be spared. And for me, building that collaboration with those countries who've been so brave, who had such a moral clarity to push away bribes or anything else and to stand by what they truly believe in, those shared values of democracy and liberties and freedom of religion. There isn't a bigger honor than that. And I think that through these delegations and through these countries that in some ways sometimes Israel took for granted, it is an opportunity to strengthen it, to build more bridges, and to show many countries that they will also benefit from these relationships with Israel, which is what I do in Africa as well, trying to push out. But this message really has to resonate among our allies.
I'd like to add an additional question, if I may, based on what you just said. Have you seen with them, for example, these Pacific nations that have close relations with Israel, external pressures maybe on them, maybe from the region or from the United Nations or other arenas where countries may have not necessarily pressured them, but tried to influence their thinking?
Of course. We've seen that, we've seen that with many countries, allies, non-allies, and we've seen how foreign money, whether it is from Qatar, from Hamas, from Iran, had really influenced governments, parliament members, the media. When the Prime Minister said yesterday that we are in a media war, truly is. There are billions of dollars who are being invested by those countries, and he named them as well, in order to fight against Israel. So the war that we're facing, this religious, cultural war, is not just being fought by the army, but also through media, social media, economically, diplomatic, through the international organizations, the UN, where they've been politicized and are being used as a political tool against Israel, against the US and its ally.
Fantastic. You mentioned, of course, Qatar, and yesterday we celebrated the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords. You have special insights with Abu Dhabi and a good relationship, as well as you mentioned Africa. You've traveled extensively on behalf of the country throughout Africa. What challenges and opportunities do you see in these specific regions, and how can these be leveraged into strategic growth for Israel?
Wow. So last week I came back from a delegation in Abu Dhabi. That was my first time ever going to the UAE. It truly opened my eyes. I was suspicious for the last 5 years. I've been working and cooperating and trying to build it, but it's only when I got there that I truly understand, that I at least believe that we have partners who really want to fight radicalization, extremism, understanding how it destabilized the region, and that only through cooperation we'll be able to build a better future for both of our children. I mean, we live in a region that's been hit for more than 20 years now with some of the worst wars and massacres and crazy events that we've experienced. And I think that this is a shared vision that both of us share. Look, we always knew the Abraham Accord were signed also because we disagreed on certain issues, and we made some concessions in order to go to a path together of that shared vision. And we knew that the Abraham Accords, for us, it was always, the challenge would have been whether in the next conflict or major outbreak of a war, of an operation, whether the Abraham Accords will truly hold. And they did. For 2 years, trade have increased, close cooperation. The UAE was the biggest contributor for humanitarian aid because of that collaboration, because we trust them and we have an open discussion, and they were able to facilitate a lot of the goods. And even though the challenges of that, I think that the day after the war, and it will come, those bridges will be stronger. More countries will want to join it. And my message, especially in the media, is always this. I think the Arab countries, the Gulf countries, the countries in the Middle East needs to make a decision. Do they want the future of their children to be dependent on the decision of a corrupt and radical Palestinian leadership? That's what it is.
Fantastic. I'll end with this question. Obviously, you just mentioned the Gulf states. One particularly has been in the news a lot more recently than others, which is Qatar, based on Israeli actions the other week. What do you see for the future of Israeli-Qatari relations? Is there room for renewed cooperation? Is there room for growth? Do we just need to maybe look, like you said, look to a future path as opposed to looking back?
So Qatar is playing a double-sided game. As long as it hosts the perpetrator, the leadership of a terrorist organization, Hamas, who have committed the worst crimes against humanity against the Jewish people, the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, there will never, I think, shouldn't be a normalization of any kind of relationship. I think that the fact that they're trying to lead the Muslim Brotherhood, who is not better than Iran, but equivalent on another scale, another side, is going to create major challenges for our region, not just Israel, but the entire region. And it will be more visible and it will be more extreme, I believe, in 10 years from now.
So lots to look forward to then. Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Thank you very much.